Guys, there we go. All right, so it's recording. All right, so I'll post this when I'm done too if you want to go back and look at anything. So again, at this point, high point here, high price, low quantity demanded. All right. If I move from this point down to this point here, now I have lower price, higher quantity demanded. So law of demand says when price goes down, quantity demanded goes up. Then if I move back the other direction, if price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. All right, and that's typically, not always. Now this is where, you know, I sometimes lose my science kids, because when you see law of something, you want it, it's permanent. It's always going to be like the law of gravity. I drop my pen, it's always going to fall, right? That's what the law of gravity states, and it's always going to be that way. Where when we talk about the law of demand, this is like how consumers typically respond. All right, because as consumers, we're trying to make rational decisions, if you remember that term, and we want to buy stuff at the lowest possible price. So when prices drop, we typically buy more of it. When prices rise, we typically buy less of it. Okay, now that's how law of demand states, but there's always going to be these outliers. Okay, one of the videos of notes I posted was this idea of elasticity of demand. So elasticity of demand is basically saying, well, it's a measurement of how responsive we are to changes in price. There's going to be some products that are going to follow the law of demand to a T. So when prices drop, we as consumers buy more of it. Okay, I would look at, and it might even be different from person to person. Like, so for me, like personally, if Dunkin' Donuts drop their prices of coffee significantly, I'm going to go stop every day on my way to work. Okay, if they raise their prices significantly, I'm not going to buy their coffee at all. All right, so I'm going to, as an individual, and I would think as a consumers as a whole, you know, we would probably follow that law of demand for something like coffee, right? But something like gasoline for your car, not so much, because even when prices go up, all right, you and I are still putting gas in our car, probably at almost, if not, you know, for sure the same rate to get around. Okay, so we call it the law of demand. We kind of be mindful that there are some goods and services out there that just aren't going to follow it to a T. Okay, another example would be something like, you know, certain brands of shoes. All right. You know, Jordan shoes are very high priced and high quantity demanded. All right. Cell phones, probably the same case. Okay. Cell phones keep going up in price and we continue to buy them. All right. We can blame the you know, Apple and Samsung all we want, but if Apple puts $1,000 phone out there and you and I continue to buy it, what's their incentive of lowering their price? Okay. You know, I saw a visual of like breaking down the cost to make an Apple iPhone one time, and it was less than a couple $100. So I mean, Apple is theoretically profiting $700-800 every iPhone they sell, times millions of iPhones probably being sold daily. You understand why they're such a large company, why they're billionaires, right? But that's you and I as consumers. Okay, you know, that's the incentive of coming up with a product like that, to start a company like that. The incentive is to make you have the opportunity to possibly make those millions and billions of dollars. And if consumers are going to buy it, there is no incentive to drop the price. Okay. Now, if we just stop buying iPhones altogether, well, now they would have to drop the price to try to kick up demand again. Okay. All right. So that's the first step. Any questions about demand from the consumer's perspective? And again, guys, I'm using this whiteboard, dry erase board thing on the screen. So bear with me as it's kind of sloppy. Okay. All right. So the supply curve, again, we have to think from the producer's perspective. You got to think from the, you know, who's making the product. Okay. So you have to transition your brain from thinking not as a consumer, because as a consumer, you want to buy at the lowest price. You got to think supply curve from the producer's perspective, because you have to, as a producer, want to sell it at the highest price. Okay. So this is why our supply curve moves in this particular direction. It's opposite of the demand curve. Okay. So again, we're going to set up the same situation. We're going to have price over here. So again, let's just use the same numbers. So let's say this is $10. We got 0. Oh, see, this is, undo that. Perfect. All right. We got quantity over here. Let's just say it's 10 units at this end. Okay. Sorry, guys. All right. So same concept. All right. On the supply curve, if we put a point over here on this end, all right, we can see that we have low price, low quantity, a little different than what we saw in the demand curve. On the demand curve, price and quantity work against each other. So on consumer demand, when price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. When price goes down, quantity demanded goes up. So it's an inverse relationship between price and quantity. Where on the producer side, on the supply side, price and quantity are the same. Okay, they work together. So again, now if I go up to this end, let's put a point up here. All right, so on this end of the graph, let's see if I can make that a little better. We have higher price down here, and we have high quantity. All right, so the law of supply works, price and quantity works together. All right, it's different than consumer in the law of demand. Because as a producer, when price is low down here, you don't want to sell a lot of it, all right? Because you're not making as much revenue. And if you're not making enough revenue, you're not paying off your debts and making profits, okay? Now, if the price you and I as consumers are willing to pay goes up, well, now the price goes up, quantity supplied is going to go up, all right? So if you're a producer, you're thinking, okay, the price is higher, I'm going to load stuff from my warehouses, I'm going to put it out there for sale, all right? Because people are now willing to pay more for those particular goods and services, so they're going to put more on the market because the price is higher, okay? So law of supply says if price goes down, quantity supplied goes down. If price goes up, quantity supplied goes up, okay? Because the producer wants to produce and sell the quantity based on what you and I are willing to spend. And if we're not willing to spend it, they're not going to put it out there for sale because it's not worth it to them, okay? If the price you and I are willing to spend goes up, they're going to shove it out in the market, all right, because now they can make money. That's why you think about like warehouses and stuff. All right, right now we're in the middle of summer. You and I aren't going to the store to buy winter clothes. All right, so you're not going to find winter clothes in the stores right now. All right, but I guarantee you that there's a warehouses upon warehouses across this country stacked full of winter clothes in boxes. All right, just waiting to come to the store shelves. All right, stuff's already produced, but why are stores in the mall or Target or Walmart or any of these stores that sell clothes, why are they going to put that in the market? Because there's not a demand for it. No one wants to buy it. All right, if they loaded the shelves with winter clothes, no one's going to buy it unless the prices were extremely low, right? If they're putting, a nice Nike hoodie out there for $5-10, and yeah, you and I would go buy it even now, but they don't want to do that because they're not going to make any revenue off it. So right now the producers keep all that stuff in storage, all right? And then once winter comes, the price you and I are now willing to pay for those things goes up. We're now over here on the curve. So now they're going to increase quantity supply to those particular goods to the market. All right. Right now for winter clothes, we would be down here. All right. You and I don't want to buy winter clothes and when it's 100 degrees outside. So the quantity supplied to the market is very low or none right now, right? I mean, you can find it on Amazon or online somewhere, but for the most part, that might not even be very easy to do. Okay. But as we get closer to wintertime, the quantity the price we're willing to pay is going to be up here now. It come, November, December. So the quantity they're going to put in the market is going to go up as well. Okay. So in a nutshell, just kind of at its base level, I know this is kind of sloppy, guys, and I apologize for that. But kind of in general, law of demand says when price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. There's an inverse relationship there. If price goes down, quantity demanded goes up, all right? Because we as consumers, when it comes to law of demand, want low prices, okay? The supply side, if price that goes up, so in other words, the price you and I are willing to pay goes up, quantity supplied is going to go up, all right? Because they're going to say, hey, if they're willing to pay a higher price, I want to sell more of it. Because if I'm a producer, I'm making more money. If the price goes down that you and I are willing to pay as consumers, they're going to lower supply to the market because they're not making that money, okay? And it's kind of a game, really, if you think about it, between the two sides, because when the prices you and I are willing to pay go down and quantity supplied goes down, sometimes what that does is it creates almost creates a scarcity for that particular product. And now when you have scarcity of an item, the value of it's going to price is going to start going up again, all right? So it's almost like and stores do this on purpose. I mean, Jordan Shoes is a good example of that. They create scarcity of that particular, those different shoes that come out when they release new lines of them. They create that scarcity, keep the amount down, which allows them to keep their prices a little higher. All right, but that's another whole area of supply and demand that you would probably learn more about if you take microeconomics in college. Okay. All right, so let me go through. So we kind of got this concept down. Okay. The next page I'm going to show you guys can be a little confusing. So hopefully I can make this make sense to you guys as much as possible. All right, so there's two ways we talk about changes in demand. There's a term we need to know. The term is quantity versus, a change in quantity demanded versus a change in just overall demand. Okay, so what we were just talking about on the last on that little the slide I was showing you guys where I was drawing it up is we were talking about going from 2 points on a curve. Okay, so we're talking about, let me see if I can bring up a highlighter. I don't know if this will work. No, maybe. No. Hold on 1 second, guys. Let me see if I can bring up a highlighter for this. Annotate. I'm just going to use a draw. It might be easier. All right. So what we were just talking about is like going from point A to point B. Okay. So we were talking about going up and down those curves. So on your end, you guys can see the A and B. I don't know if you can see my little mouse cursor moving from A to B, but that's what we were just talking about. So as price goes from $1.50 down to $1 for, what are we talking about, coffee beans here, our quantity demanded went from 8.1 to 10. All right, so that followed the law of demand. When price went down, quantity demanded went up. Okay, so that's what we call a movement along the demand curve. Okay, so you can see the arrow here pointing to this text box here where it says is not the same thing as a movement along the demand curve. We're talking about two different things when we're talking about a shift of the demand curve and a movement along the demand curve. Okay, so when I go from A to B, the thing that is causing that change along the demand curve is the price changing. Okay, so as I go from $1.50 to $1, price is going down. All right, and that is what's causing a change in what we call quantity demanded. So that's the key word. If price is the cause, we're always going to be talking about a movement along the demand curve, and our reason for that movement along the demand curve is always going to be price. We call that a change in quantity demanded. All right, so the word price and quantity always go together. Okay, if we're shifting the entire curve, so as you see, as I go from point A to C, all right, our entire curve is shifting. So in other words, as I go from A to C, you see there's an overall increase in overall demand. I'm not saying I'm changing quantity demanded, I'm saying a change in overall demand. All right, so as I go from A to C, our overall demand went from 8.1 to 9.7. All right, but what you notice did not happen is as I go from A to C, is price did not change. Okay, so when I shift the demand curve, we know that something is causing overall demand, all demand across the board to change regardless of the price. So in other words, price is not causing that change in overall demand. All right, so again, one more time, again, if I'm moving along the demand curve, so as I go from A to B or B to A, that's being caused by changes in price. So price goes up, price goes down. Quantity demanded goes down and up based on those changes in price. If our entire curve is shifting, all right, there's something else causing that in the market, that our entire market of consumers wants more of that product, or vice versa. We could go A to, if I put a point over here, I could draw a demand curve like this, and we could be over here. This could just make this point D. All right, sorry, not sloppy, but we could be shifting from A to D, and overall in the market as a whole, we're demanding less of that particular good of coffee, in this case, at all prices. Okay, so I'm going to go through that now. What causes our entire curve to shift? Okay, if we're moving along the curve from one point to the other, price is the only answer. All right, that is the reason why quantity demanded is moving up and down, or going up and down with the price changes. If our entire curve is shifting, it's going to be one of these causes here. Let me go over that with you guys. Okay, just talked about that. All right, so we're gonna, there's an acronym for demand changes called merit. So each letter obviously represents one of the 5 changes of change in demand, okay? So, and again, these are gonna be, looking at the consumers as a whole, all right? Because your demand and my demand for a particular product might be different, but if we add up all our individual demands curves for different products, then we have our market demand curve. All right, so the first cause of change in overall changes in demand. So again, like it shows here that the curve shifting to the right for an increase in demand or shifting to the left with a decrease in demand. Our first cause is called market size. All right, market size is just simply the number of consumers either willing to or not willing to buy that product. All right, market size could be populations. All right, so you think of areas that are growing or booming. All right, as more people move to an area, more stores are necessary, so the demand goes up because there's more people. Okay, market sizes can change based on marketing itself. All right, products are constantly trying to figure out how can we market our product to different groups or expand our market size so more people either demand it or maybe not demand it. Right, so market size is just looking at the pure numbers. All right, more people are trying to buy it, or they're trying to gain access to those particular goods and services, causing demand to increase or shift to the right. Or sometimes market sizes decrease because populations are shrinking, or that particular group of consumers just don't want those products anymore. So market size are decreasing, causing demand to shift to the left or decrease. Okay. Let me go through from the slideshow view. It might be easier. All right, the next one is expectations. So future prices. So this is looking at, how is the current demand going to be impacted by future prices. Now we talked about that movement along the curve is caused by price changes, but those are price changes now. Future prices are going to be causing shifts of the demand curve. All right. So it's going to say, okay, if we know the future price is going to be higher, how are we going to respond now as consumers? If we know the future price is going to be lower, how are we going to respond now? Okay. So our first line, if the future price is going to be higher, so I know it's going to cost me more later, that means it's cheaper now, current demand will increase. All right. So current demand is going to go up because more people are going to want to buy that product now before the prices go up. If I know the future price a month from now, the price is going to be lower, then I'm going to wait and my current demand will go down. It'll decrease. All right. Because as consumers as a whole, we're going to say, you know what? The price for these particular goods are going to be a lot better in a month, 2 months from now. So I'm going to wait. All right. Maybe you're thinking about that with maybe even some summer clothes or something. You're like, I don't really need it. I could use some new things, but I'm going to wait a month. And then come, August, end of August, when they start putting their summer clothes on sale, that's when I'll go buy more summer clothes. Okay. So we're constantly trying to play that expectation game as consumers to buy stuff. Okay. Think about air conditioners. All right. If your air conditioner goes out in the middle of summer, they're going to be able to charge you a crazy amount because it's a need right now. Right. All right. But if your air conditioner is kind of like on the fritz, it's slowly going to be, it's going out in the next year or two, maybe, come fall or wintertime even would be the best time to have someone install a new air conditioner because you're going to get it for a lot less price. All right. Pools. All right. This was a crazy year for pools. All right. I actually called in the springtime. We've always had like one of these pop-up pool things that I put up every spring. It's decent size, but we're kind of like ready to maybe put a permanent pool in. So I called in the springtime, and the demand for pools this year because of COVID, no one's going anywhere, was so high. When I called in, what did I call in? February, March, April, probably April. I called middle of April. I called about, just to get some prices on pools. They were already sold out of of their cheapest models, and they were already booked for installation all the way until August. So even in April, May, I would have had to wait until August to get a pool installed. So, and the prices were insane. Okay. Now come September, October, or even the middle of winter time, I'm going to look at pool prices again, because pool prices are going to be a lot less. So I can maybe go buy a pool kit, the whole pool set up, store it in my garage, buy it in November for a quarter, half the price, maybe not necessarily half the price, but a lot less than they're currently going for, put it in my garage, and then come springtime, install it. All right. So that's kind of the game you want to play when you're talking about expectations, when you're talking about shifts in the price curves. Okay. All right, the next one, and this one can get a little, we got to kind of look at it from two different perspectives, okay? Again, you see the word price, but we're not talking about the current price of coffee beans is causing the change in coffee beans, quantity demanded of coffee beans to move. We're talking about the change of the price of one good and how is that impacting the overall demand of another good, okay? So we call it prices of related goods. If goods are complements, okay, so in other words, they go together. So my example are hot dogs and hot dog buns. Typically, we kind of see their supply and demand, or their changes in demand work together as well. All right. So I'm just trying to use my camera here and use my thumbs because this is what I do in class. I try to use visuals. All right. So if the price of hot dogs goes down, we know that the quantity based on that curve moving along the curve. So if price of hot dogs goes down, my quantity demanded for hot dogs is going to go up, which means that complements, if I'm buying more hot dogs, I'm also going to buy more hot dog complements. So buns, ketchup, mustard. I'm sorry, not ketchup. If you're in Chicago, you're not supposed to put ketchup on your hot dogs. All right. So all the things that go with complements of hot dogs are going to go up in demand as well. All right. So grocery stores play that game, right? They'll lower the price of one item to get more people to buy that particular good, but they're also going to buy the complements of that good as well. All right. So complements work together. Substitutes work against each other. All right. So again, using my thumbs is kind of visual, may as well make sense. All right. So if the price of the original item goes up, so that tells me, okay, if the price of Pepsi goes up, quantity demanded for Pepsi is going to go down. All right. Because we're not going to buy as much Pepsi. All right. So price goes up, quantity demanded, moving along the curve for this situation here, price goes down, or quantity demanded goes down for Pepsi. However, my demand for substitutes of Pepsi is going to go up because it's the opposite. All right, so I'm going to demand more Coca-Cola or other products. Okay, so that's just kind of how this works. All right, maybe if you can look at going back to the hot dog example. If the price of hot dogs goes down, all right, my demand for hot dogs goes up. So I'm buying more hot dogs, but now my demand for brats or burgers is going to go down because those would have been substitutes of hot dogs. All right, so kind of to me it works. I've always been a visual person, so seeing the kind of talking through those examples like that, it works. Okay, and if you have any questions on any of those, don't hesitate to ask. All right. All right, the other ones then are income. The last two, income, again, there's two parts to it, kind of like substitutes and complements. Income, we're going to look at two different types of goods. We got normal goods, which are the things that you and I are going to demand on a regular basis, all right? And we want, okay, more of if we can afford them, the way I look at it, okay? So when when our incomes go up, all right, when incomes are going up, we're going to buy more normal goods, all right? And the opposite would be true as well. If my income's going down, I'm going to buy fewer normal goods. So I was thinking normal goods is like our name brand stuff, the stuff you want to be able to buy if you can afford it. So as you make more money, you buy more, nicer food, nicer clothes. Those would be considered your normal goods. All right, your inferior goods are things you demand less of as your income goes up. All right, so I know this might be a generic example, but comparing steak to Spam. All right, so as my income goes up, I'm going to buy more normal goods like steak. All right, my income goes up, I'm going to buy fewer inferior goods like Spam. Okay, or products that I wouldn't otherwise want to buy if I can afford other stuff. Okay, so that's kind of the way you want to look at normal goods and inferior goods. Think of normal goods, maybe your name brand stuff. Inferior goods would be, maybe your off-brand stuff. Now, this is going to be different from person to person. Okay, all right, what you see as a normal good, I might see as an inferior good, or vice versa. But as a consumer group as a whole, it usually comes out in large numbers. All right, and then the last one, you'll like my picture here using the mullets as my example. I usually make fun of a few kids in class once you get to know you guys a little more, but and tie a person from each to each of the pictures. But so taste is just simply popularity. All right. Some goods, the popularity of goods only lasts so long. All right. Now the mullet trend has been slowly coming back, which I kind of wish I could embrace, but I don't think I can anymore. I did have a mullet back in the day, and no, that is not me on the far left. But the popularity and taste of products is constantly shifting, right? As something's popular, the demand is skyrocketing, right? And then all of a sudden, popularity of products just plummets and it disappears. Think of some of those products like you guys grew up, like the Silly Bands examples, my go-to example for stuff like this, right? Silly Bands, fidget spinners. There's that couple months where fidget spinner demand was just, the popularity, was growing crazy. The demand was growing crazy, right? To the point where they're selling those fidget spinners at 7-Eleven for 14 bucks a piece or 20 bucks a piece for some of them, right? So that's how demand works, though, right? When popularity is high, demand's high, they're going to try to move those prices up. They're going to keep push the limit on those prices to find that point where you and I are okay, maxed out now, all right? And our demand's going to start decreasing if they continue to raise prices. Okay. Any questions on those? So those are what causes the demand curve to shift. Okay. And then the opposite, let me go back to this. So I'm also going to go through what causes the supply curve to shift. So same concept I just went over with demand. All right, nothing changes here. Okay. If I am moving from point A to point B or vice versa, B to A to B, those are movements along the supply curve. All right. These are going to be caused by changes in price. When price goes up from $1 to $1.50, you can see supply went from 10 to 11.2. So producers, now we're on supply, so think business owner, all right? 10-year business owner as I go through these next steps. So if the price you and I are willing to pay is going up, you're the business owner going to say, hey, I want to put more out there for sale because people are buying it. If I go from B to A and the price that you and I are as consumers are willing to pay goes down from $1.50 to $1, now the supplier's going to say, hey, let's pull back a little bit because I'm not making as much revenue or profit on these products. So in other words, let's create scarcity and hope to get that price to stop going down and then slowly work its way back up, right? So again, if I'm moving along the curve, we call that a change in quantity supplied, and it's always and only going to be caused by a change in price. Okay, if I'm shifting the entire supply curve either to the right because we're increasing overall supply, or I'm going to draw one over here, or I'm shifting to the left because I'm decreasing overall supply, right? That is not caused by price because you can see as I go from A to C or my new point A to D, the price is still $1, but our overall quantity, the overall amount demanded has gone up or gone down. All right, so there's something else behind the scenes happening that's causing producers as a whole to increase overall supply, even if prices aren't changing, or decrease overall supply, even if prices aren't changing. Okay. All right, so I'll do the same thing. I'm just going to go through in a little more detail. What causes those shifts of supply? All right, the movement along the curve, that should be an easy one, right? The only thing that's going to cause that movement up and down along the curve is price changes. Price goes up, quantity supplied goes up, price goes down, quantity supplied goes down. But these shifts to the right or left of the curve are what's going to be caused by something outside. Where are we at? There we go. All right, so I'm not going to go through all this. Let's just go to, all right, so factors that shift the supply curve. So again, you have to look at these from the producer's perspective, okay? Because if you're thinking about these from the consumer's perspective, it's not going to make sense. And any questions on these, you could get them wrong, okay? I don't know where my mouse went. I can't. See if I go. There we go. Forward a little bit. All right. So these are the things that cause a shift of the supply curve. So the first one is just how much does it cost to produce? Okay, cost of input. So again, producer hat, all right, I'm the owner of the business. It's now making me more, all right, to make my product. I'm going to decrease supply. If it's costing me less to produce my product, I'm now going to increase supply. Because remember, the price, regardless of price, okay? So coffee might be an example of this, right? Let's say there's a drought in South America where we get a lot of our coffee beans from, and the supply of coffee beans decreases, so the price of those coffee beans to make coffee is going to go up. It's going to be harder to get those coffee beans. It's going to be more expensive to produce the coffee itself. So a lot of suppliers are going to just decrease supply to the market until prices come down, okay? Because they can't be changing their prices of coffee like at restaurants and stuff all the time, okay? And you might even see at like grocery stores, the cost of coffee it's like a roller coaster if you buy coffee grounds or the beans themselves for that reason, okay? Same thing if the cost to produce goes down. All right, so let's say some new technology comes out or whatever the case might be, they found new resources. So now I can make my product as a producer cheaper. It's costing me less to make it. I'm going to increase supply, all right, and maybe not alter my prices right away because I'm going to try to pump more into the market at that price that us as consumers are willing to pay for it and try to hit it and make as much profits and revenues as I can. All right, once we as consumers catch on to that, we'll start saying, that's too high of a price. I don't want it at that price anymore. And the price would slowly start coming down, okay? All right, government policies plays a huge role on the producer side. All right, this is one of those areas that we talked about with our free market system versus command economics versus market economics, and the areas that the U.S. economy has government involvement and where we want them to be involved and not be involved, and why this is such a big debate, because they do play a huge role in the prices and supply sometimes of products, okay? So something like taxes, kind of look at taxes as like an input cost, all right? So if a firm, business taxes, corporate taxes sometimes go up, so the producers have to look at that as an input cost, all right? So if the government's taxing producers more, now the producer is going to say, well, it's costing me more to produce, so I might supply less to the market, all right? Where if the government comes in and says, hey, we're going to cut taxes to certain businesses or producers, well, now taxes went down. As a business supplier, my cost to produce just went down. Now I can supply more to the market because it's costing me less to produce, okay? So usually that's kind of how it works when it comes to taxes. Now you got to find kind of that middle ground, right? Because some people are going to say, well, those billion-dollar corporations can afford those taxes, where maybe the small mom and pop shop can't. All right, so trying to create policy that's fair for everyone, or you can get everyone on board. That's the political side of it that you can debate till you're blue in the face, right? Regulations kind of work the same way. So regulations are rules on production that are put in place by federal, state, local governments. So usually when regulations are put in place, it's going to cost a producer more to produce, all right? So if the government comes in and says, hey, you have to produce products that emit less pollution to the atmosphere, all right? Well, that's good. Kind of look at the two sides, right? The cost and benefits of that. Great benefits because it's going to be better for society, but it's going to come at the cost of higher production costs for the producer. So they're either going to decrease supply of their product or raise the prices of their product. So we got to kind of find that happy medium between, having regulations that are good for everybody. Yes, the consumer, yes, the environment, but also the producer at the same time, which again can be that ongoing political debate on what's good and what's not. Okay, so one of the examples I use, and not to try to get too political, but years ago they put some pretty hefty regulations into auto manufacturing, right? And I forget what the exact numbers were, but they put some legislation through that said by the year 2025 or whatever it was going to be, 2021, cars being produced had to be under a certain emissions. Okay, well, it was a great idea when it was put in place, all right? But as time went on, the auto industry, the GMs, the Fords, the Toyotas are now saying, yeah, we could probably hit that number, but it's going to cost us so much to hit that number. What we're going to have to charge for a car, no one's going to be able to afford to buy a car. All right. So in recent years, they've backed some of those regulations up. It's not that they back those regulations up because they're, anti-environment or they don't want to protect the environment, but they're also have to look at the production of the cars and all the, think about the car industry and how many jobs that creates. And if they can't hit those and people aren't buying cars, then that could be a problem detrimental to a certain sector of the economy. So trying to find that balance between what's good regulation, what's not good regulation, what's good for the company, what's good for the people and the environment. Those are sometimes hard to find that common ground. Okay. Subsidies are when the government pays to produce. All right. So think of a subsidy as like your costs are going down. So if you're producing a product like masks, all right now, or certain pharmaceutical companies are trying to come up with vaccines for COVID, right? The government is pumping tons of money and subsidies into the production of those products. So in other words, you're getting paid by the government to produce those products, and then you still get to sell them and make a profit. So when you get a subsidy, your costs go down. So you're going to try to pump as much of that product into the market as possible. Okay. So subsidies work kind of the opposite of regulations and taxes usually. All right. The other factor that's going to cause changes in the overall supply. Remember, we're talking about increasing total supply or decreasing total supply. Simply number of firms. All right. As products develop and change, especially when new products first come out, you might have one or a couple, very few firms producing something. So years ago, when tablets first started coming about, Apple kind of controlled the market, and now, anyone that does some form of technology production probably makes their own version of a tablet of some sort. I've even seen they have like tablets for dogs now that dogs can hit with their paws when you're gone and stuff like that. So, so number of firms just simply either increases supply, or as time goes on, at some point, I don't know when it would be, tablets might no longer be in demand. There'll be some new product out there that we then want. All right. And you might think that's crazy, but think about things like your iPods, or that were used for just music. All right. Once phones develop their own way of using, or just as good for using, storing music on, the idea of iPhone or of iPods and MP3 players disappeared. Right. And during those years that iPods and MP3 players were extremely popular, like tablets are today, you would have thought someone was a moron for saying, oh, eventually we're not going to want iPods and MP3 players anymore. All right. But now the demand for those are significantly down, almost to nothing. Technological change is always probably shifting the curve to the right. Is always increasing overall supply. I can't really think of examples when we go backwards technologically, but this is a huge piece in our society, especially in the U.S. economy. We're always coming up with new technology, new ways to produce things faster, more efficient. And you know what? This is, even with COVID, this whole situation with people working from home, right? You saw major technological changes in using things like we're using right now, like Zoom, for your everyday work. So you're going to see major changes in the economy of the U.S. over the next 5 to 10 years, as companies are starting to get back more to work and saying, you know what, I had 100 employees, and when these employees were working from home, we found ways to be just as efficient. So I'm going to lower my employers from 100 to 80 or 50 or whatever, because of these technological changes of how to use technology differently. So, but kind of be mindful that the way our economy works, because it's a free market, when those things happen, because people are going to be looking for work or new ways of working, new technology is going to be developed. Someone's going to come up with something that we don't even know about yet. That's going to be a whole new area of jobs. All right. I mean, we think about Amazon, Amazon 15, 20 years ago wasn't even a thought, right? Now look at Amazon today. Streaming movies and TV like we do today. We used to go rent stuff at like Blockbuster. If you guys remember that video, that first worksheet I showed you guys, the developers of Netflix went to Blockbuster movie stores and said, hey, Blockbuster, we got this idea of renting movies differently, through the mail, and then eventually this idea of streaming stuff. And Blockbuster laughed at it and said, "Oh, that'll never take off. People want to go to the store and rent movies." And now Blockbuster's gone, and Netflix is around, and Netflix has gotten into so many different areas. And as Netflix has grown, right? Yeah, a lot of people lost their jobs that worked for Blockbuster. Well, no, a whole new area of our economy was developed in this area of streaming. And now you went from having Netflix to everyone does streaming, right? To Disney Plus, the Hulu's, all those things have developed based on the Netflix concept. So kind of take those technological changes, as advancements. Yes, we kind of see areas maybe shut down because of technological change, but it usually means that some other area is being developed or created. All right, so nature plays a major role in our supply chain. Natural disasters, weather, and I would include, I'm not going to go through all those bullet points, those are just some natural disasters, but I would consider, you can even throw COVID into this concept of natural disasters, right? Because over those months, March, April, and May, when everything was really shut down, supply chains were shut down in certain areas, right? That's why we saw huge decreases in the amount of, maybe toilet paper or other food products, especially when factories, I think it was like Tyson and stuff like that make a lot of frozen food. When their factories and plants were shut down because someone was, had COVID in their plant, they had to shut it down for multiple weeks. That just disrupts the entire supply side of our economy, and you see those major decreases in supply, whether it's weather. I'm going to have to add to the slide and include, major pandemics, I guess, as a form of like a natural disaster as well, because that causes crazy disruptions in our supply side. Okay. And then similar to demand, future prices as well. Now this kind of fits the example I gave you guys with demand when we're talking about, clothes, right? Or when I was talking about the supply curve, when I said think about winter clothes, right? Right now, this, somewhere, warehouses are stacked full of boxes like that with all the winter clothes that will be on the shelves in a couple months. All right. So there's inventory. And this is kind of the huge part of our economy right now. You see all these warehouses going up everywhere as they just stockpile all that stuff in inventory until the demand goes up, and then they take it out of inventory and supply it to the market. All right. But they're waiting for that higher price. So they'll be willing to pay whatever it costs to keep the electric on in these warehouses until the price for those particular goods goes up, and then they'll unload that stuff from the warehouses and inventory onto the store shelves for you and I to buy. Okay. All right, so let me go back to these two things here, guys. All right, so looks like I had a little internet disruption there. Hopefully we're good. All right, so again, just focusing on these two things. If we're moving between the two curves, the only thing that's going to cause that change from A to B on the supply curve is that change in price, okay? If our entire curve is shifting, you got to go back to the notes I just went over with you guys. There's something other than price causing the entire supply curve to shift to the right or to the left, or the entire demand curve to shift from the right or to the left, okay? All right, so to finish this off, you guys are going to be doing a worksheet that looks like this, one of the worksheets besides the reading guides. All right, so using the information I just went over, okay, you got, for this worksheet, you have to see that difference between if we're shifting along the demand curve or supply curves, or we're shifting the entire demand or supply curve, okay? So it says, I'll just do number one with you guys, which movement reflects a decrease in demand, all right? If we're not talking about a change in quantity demanded, we're shifting the curve. So you got to find one of those options that's going to be reflecting a shift of the curve for number one. So A to E, that's a movement along the curve, so that's not correct. A to C, that would work, all right, because I'm shifting the entire curve. That's what we call a decrease in demand, because I'm shifting to the left, okay? A to D, all right, is a shift of the demand curve, but it's an increase in demand, okay? So kind of keep that in mind. Read the statement carefully. and go back to this video or use any of the notes. All right. If it's a change in overall demand or supply, the entire curve is shifting to the left or right. If it's an increase or decrease in quantity demanded or supplied, we're moving along the curve. Okay. Other than that, I think we are good. Okay, so all your assignments are for supply and demand are uploaded to Google Classroom, so you can knock those out. Like I said, I'm still working on that macro one. I want to get that up by hopefully in the next couple hours. So I'm trying to make it as user friendly as possible because it wasn't switching over from a Word document to a Google Doc very well. So I may have to load it as a Word document, and then you guys can just load it back up as a Word document, even if it's as a PDF or a visual. Okay. Other than that, you guys are good. I'll stick around. If you have any questions for me, feel free to stay on and ask. Otherwise, you're free to go.